Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Lit Talk, a reading and conversation with Indigenous writers. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry about that, everybody. Got a lot of feedback there. So tonight's Lit Talk is a reading and conversation with Indigenous writers. I'm Anna Cristiano. I'm a programming curator with the Connecticut Literary Festival, which produces the Lit Talk series out of Central Connecticut State University. Joe Thumbrella is the festival director who usually gives out these introductions, so I'm here on his behalf tonight. I want to thank the English department at CCSU and the rest of our sponsors, particularly the CT Humanities, who have helped fund our programming this year. And thanks to you all for being here. The chat is open, so please feel free to type your thoughts as we go. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see a button that says Ask a Question, and you can use that to send in a question to our moderator, who will then choose whether to pose it to the guests. We're pleased to have Professor Sandy Grande here to moderate the discussion tonight. Sandy Grande is a professor of political science and Native American and Indigenous studies at the University of Connecticut. Her research and teaching interfaces Native American and Indigenous studies with critical theory toward the development of a more nuanced analysis of the colonial present. She is the author of Red Pedagogy, Native American Social and Political Thought. She is also a founding member of New York Stands for Standing Rock, a group of scholars and activists that forwards the aims of Native American and Indigenous sovereignty and resurgence. Sandy, thank you so much for being here.
It's really lovely to be here. I'm so excited to be invited to be in conversation with the amazing Indigenous authors, Native women this evening. You guys are all in for a treat. So I'll introduce myself first and then each of the authors.
I'll leave you to it and I'll see you at the end of the program.
Great. Ayanchu, Ayumpunche, Nyokaka Wangukspa, Vilka Alapan, Wilna Kushani, Nyoka Quechua, Hartford, Connecticut, Monticani, Nyoka Hatun Yachechek, Political Science, University of Connecticut, Sweetie Sandy Grande. Hi, good evening. Coming to you from Wanguk territory, otherwise known as Hartford, Connecticut. We have with us here tonight some amazing women, Natasha Gambrell, Marcy Rendon, and Deborah Jackson Taffa. And I will introduce them one at a time, and they're going to do a short reading from their work. So you guys are in for a treat in terms of that. And then after each of them have finished their readings, then I will, we'll all be in conversation with each other and talk a little bit about this moment in Native Lit and also what it means to be an Indigenous author in this time. So I'm going to start with Natasha. There you go. Wonderful to see you, Natasha. Natasha is a member of the Eastern Pequot Tribal Nation. In 2015, she graduated from Eastern Connecticut State University with a BA in English. In 2017, she was elected as a tribal councilor and is the youngest person to be elected. Such an accomplishment she's extremely proud of. She's currently serving in her second term. She's also actively participates with the Archeology Field School Collaborative with UMass Boston, and she's been doing that since 2008. So lovely to see you, Natasha. Natasha's also a teacher. We both have a little bit of hoarse voices tonight. But we're thrilled to have you, thrilled to hear some of your work. So if you would be so willing to share some with us.
Sorry, again, I am a little hoarse. Again, hello, I'm Natasha Gambrell, a proud member of the Eastern Pequot Tribal Nation. We are located in North Stonington, Connecticut. I write poetry, so I'm just going to read a poem that I had written. It is about a federal recognition battle that my tribe has gone through for several years and currently what happened. So on October 12, 2005, the United States government said my tribe ceased to exist, gone, kaput, just like that, a figment of your imagination. This is our story. So the name of the poem is called They Were Celebrating. They were celebrating while my heart was cold. It was like a blizzard had swept my entire body. They were celebrating. That day, the Creator didn't embrace us with his warmth, but instead left us frozen, feeling his bitter teardrops. They were celebrating while I sat there, twisting and turning, mesmerized by the idea of federal recognition. They were celebrating while the elders were sick and hopeless and the youth were uninspired and suffering ambition. They were celebrating. Well, there was little concern in the air. See, we knew we were a tribe, and we had existed since the beginning of time. They were celebrating while we played honor songs to mourn the loss of our foreign warriors. They were celebrating while that drum pounded like a bold fist, biting its way to my ears like the struggle of my people. They were celebrating while I passed that red house with the red mailbox. My nerves were already tied in knots, and the road and all of its cracky imperfections did little to grant forgiveness. They were celebrating while I could see the fire lit and members of our tribe huddled around its burning flame. They were celebrating while we had hoped the past frustrations and attempts at recognition would be wiped clean, a new dawn for my people. They were celebrating while that fax came down and they destroyed us with a single mark of a pen. They were celebrating while history had repeated itself and the government had wiped out another powerful nation. They were celebrating while I looked at my people everywhere in tears, sad that their day of recognition passed by with a colorblind eye. They were celebrating while after all these years, nothing had changed. The white men continued to speak with a forked tongue. They were celebrating October 12th, Columbus Day, while we were left dead on Lantern Hill. They were celebrating while Attorney General Richard Blumenthal stated this was the greatest day in Connecticut state history. Those words burned like salt in a wound. They were celebrating that day I learned to hate. But one day we will celebrate. Our time will come to receive our federal recognition and help deliver our official identity, a wounded, resilient, proud people. I hope. So
Wow.
just to give a little background on that, because I'm just going to read that one poem. I was 13 years old when they took away our federal recognition. I was on the reservation, and that day was a day that I will never forget. It still brings pain, and you can hear it in my voice when I say it because I still have all that pain. But on that day, that was the day that I became determined to fight for my people in every way possible. So that is what I do. And again, I'm a proud member of the Eastern Pequot Tribal Nation. For so long, the state of Connecticut has left us voiceless, or tried to. But I am living proof that we exist, we remain, we are still here, and we will continue to fight. Thank you.
Awesome. Right there with you, Natasha. Those super powerful words. I can't wait till we return to them and have some good conversation. All right. Next up, it's hard not to just dive in right now, but we're going to next bring up Marcy Rendon. Make sure she's there. Hi, Marcy. Marcy is White Earth Ojibwe. She's listed in Oprah's 2020 list of 31 Native American authors to read. She also received Minnesota's 2020 McKnight Distinguished Artist Award. Sinister Graves, the third Cash Black Bear novel, will be available this coming October through Soho Press. Girl Gone Missing and Murder on the Red River both received prestigious recognition. And Stitches of Tradition, which is a children's book, is going to be published by Heart Drum in 2024. So Marcy, you're super prolific, very well known across Indian country, so lovely and thrilled. Such an honor actually to have you tonight and be in conversation with you. So I'm going to turn it to you and as you gift us with a reading this evening.
Bonjour.
Universe, but let's see if we can fix that sound.
Hello.
I don't know how we call. Let me turn off my sound and see if that helps.
Hello.
I got a note that they're trying to fix it. Hang on, everybody hang tight. But she said we're going to go to Deborah while we try to figure it out. So maybe, Marcy, they'll work with you maybe offline to see what they can do with your sound. But let's try. So is that okay? I think they're going to switch over. All right, I think we're going to try. Deborah, we are having a little trouble with Marcy's audio, so I hope we're good with you, but we'll give it a shot. It's the anticipation that everybody needs us to wait to hear Marcy's latest works. But such a treat to be in conversation with you as well. Everyone, this is Deborah Jackson Tafa. She's Quechan and Laguna Pueblo. She's a director of the MFA program in creative writing at the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico, otherwise known as IAIA. She's passionate about promoting Indigenous voices and values. Her work can be found at the Boston Review, A Public Space, the Best American series, and many other places. She wants to thank her supporters, PEN America, McDowell Hedgebrook, Tin House, Cransbrook Arts, the University of Iowa, and the Ellen Malloy Foundation. Deborah, lovely to have you here tonight, and I can't wait to hear from some of your words tonight. So I'll hand it over to you. Oh, I think
Unmute myself. Am I okay? Can you hear me? Okay, awesome. Hi, everyone. Thank you for logging in. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you to the Connecticut Literary Festival for having me tonight. I am going to read a piece that is set on my home reservation where I was born, which is known as the Quetzan. We are one of the 5 Colorado River tribes. A lot of people refer to us as the Yuma Nation. So my grandparents met at Indian boarding school. My grandmother was from Laguna Pueblo. My grandfather was Quetzan from Yuma. And my mother is Chicana from Socorro, New Mexico. So my whole family is from the Southwest. And I'm coming at you today from Tiwa Land in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The piece that I'm reading is a nonfiction piece. It is called My Cousin's Backyard. Leonard. Leonard thinks he's a badass walking behind the casino, making his way over to the party. I'm the female answer to him and his Sioux style, wrapped up cool in black boots. The music pumps loud and my feet want to fly, but I stay on the earth when I see him coming. He drives a red Ford Escort with tinted windows and has a tiny water drum hanging from the rearview mirror, like the kind they sell at Shoe Shaw's in Gallup. They built a casino in my cousin Jess's backyard with blue neon lights and machines making promises. Included in your neighborhood ticket, a view of the traffic coming across the bridge from Yuma and a Kenny Rogers concert you don't have to pay to hear. All our friends come and we stand around the fire in the cool Sonoran night, laughing and talking. They built a casino in my cousin's backyard. The government gave us neat HUD houses all in a row, and we call it Easter Egg Lane with pasty pastel colors lining the street. It's ugly, and we figure they want us to be happy, but not too happy. I got the shell of a cool blue, and no one fights in my home. But my cousin has the sick pale green of envy covering his walls, and she likes to get a running start when she punches him. They built a casino in my cousin's backyard. As a little boy, Jess had ear infections and a soft, fat face. I squeezed his sweaty palm in mine and thought I would always take care of him. Then he grew into an Indian Paul Bunyan and took care of me. He left once for college in Kansas on a football scholarship, but he liked to beat people off the field for practice. They said it was against the rule book and sent him home. They built a casino in my cousin's backyard, and the gamblers or drinkers may have been the ones. No one knows for sure. She was just a little girl coming home crying, but refusing to say who. We knew right away what was wrong. She hid under her bed for hours. I tried to hold Jess back, but he bucked, his long black hair in my hands like reins, and I couldn't stop him. They built the casino in my cousin's backyard, and he went down the street with a rifle in his hand. We shouted for him to come home and sit his chubby butt down. He's still a little boy to me. He really is gentle despite his size, big hands bald and fierce dark eyes. Don't let his disposition for unhappiness scare you. He won't sit sweat with any white man and talks a lot of bullshit, but underneath, he's still the kid with the earache and bright crow-like gaze. They built the casino in my cousin's backyard, but he can't see it from his prison cell in Southern California. He can't see how her boyfriend rakes broken glass before parties so a game of tag can be played without the kids getting hurt. He can't see the old barrel cut in half to make a grill, or guess that Isaiah has started hunting again. He can't know that we're eating dove as we stare at the blue neon lights, or that we're listening to Kenny Rogers bang on the Sonoran Desert ceiling. At least he gets his per capita check. When's just getting out? Ray asks every time we get together. His memory is short as a Marine's haircut. Leonard arrives to distract us. He shrugs with that goofy smile and gives the official Fort Yuma handshake to everyone. He's a serious kid. I noticed when we met at Arizona Western College. We started the same rhetoric section last week. We'll learn to argue like experts, I say, throwing my napkin onto the heat. We watch as the bright lipstick in the shape of my mouth catches fire on the red-hot grill. The kids yell, "Not it," and I imagine what I thought I'd never imagine again. Something right coming from this blue-lit backyard with its star-muffled sky. Thank you.
Wow, Deborah, that was amazing. I feel you took us on like a whole emotional universe, a whole arc there. It was lovely. We are going to try Marcy one more time, and I really, really hope it works this time so we can hear her beautiful words. And then I think they're going to bring everybody back. So let's see if we can get Marcy in the room. Hey, Marcy. How's your sound now? You want to give it a try? You're muted right now.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Yay.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Well, we'll try it again. I won't read the whole introduction again, but just a reminder in case folks have just logged on. Marcy is White Earth Ojibwe, prolific author, has several books coming out, listed on Oprah's 2020 list of 31 Native American authors. So you all are in for a treat. All right, Marcy, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you. I think we already had a couple treats. Bonjour, Awanakwe Indigenous cause. And like she said, I'm originally from the White Earth Reservation here in Minnesota. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I'm going to read from Girl Gone Missing, which is the second in my Cash Black Bear series. Cash pulled herself up and out of her bedroom window. Her heart beat in her ears and she shivered uncontrollably. She took off running barefoot, zigzagging across the damp ground. Her eyes darted left and right. She ran toward the plowed field, in the direction that led to town. Her foot sank into the cold, wet dirt of the furrowed field. When she tried to pull her foot up, her front leg sank into the dirt even deeper. She threw herself forward, clawing at the mud with bare hands, hearing the heavy, labored breathing of the person chasing her. Fear forced her from her body so that she was soon flying above herself. She looked back to see who was chasing her, but all she could see was a body, the face obscured in the darkness. She looked down and could see herself stretched out in the mud below, buried to her knees, arms flailing. Some of her long brown hair was tangled up in her hands as she struggled to steady herself. But the body changed abruptly, no longer her struggling, not a short, dark-haired Indian girl, but a pale, tall, and bony blonde who looked up at Cash and screamed, "Help me." On that sunny note, Cash crawled out of bed, got dressed, and headed from Fargo to the Moorhead State campus on the other side of the Red River. And I'm going to kind of skip around here a little bit. The story is set in the Red River Valley here in Minnesota. And one of the things that the Red River Valley is famous for is sugar beets. Anybody who uses white sugar, it probably came from someplace here in the valley. Driving beet truck wasn't as dirty as driving during combine season, when chaff and wheat bits got into all the creases of your clothes and the dust coated your hair like baby powder. But the smell of the beet plant clung to your garments. Cash figured it would be Christmas before the smell washed out completely. She wore a flannel shirt because the heater didn't always work in Milt Wang's trucks. She quickly braided her waist-length hair into one long braid and pulled on her jean jacket. She filled a red thermos with hot coffee and opened the fridge as if there might be food in there. 2 bare shells with a half dozen carton of eggs looked out at her. She'd have to grab a tuna sandwich from the silver cup. The evening waitress was used to Cash running in and saying, "Tuna sandwich." Skipping ahead a little bit again. Cash put the ranchero in reverse, then headed east to Highway 75, going north of Moorhead. Just as she was signaling to turn on 75, she changed her mind, decided to keep going straight east to the neighboring town of Hawley, where she turned north on Highway 9, a highway that would take her directly into the county seat of Ada. After a few miles, she crossed through the small town of Felton, noticing several grain trucks lined up at the elevators. She drove a few miles farther, past the Lutheran church that sat on the edge of the Borup Township. Still going north, she rounded a curve on the highway and crossed a bridge over the Wild Rice River, which was not much more than a narrow creek this late in the fall. As she came out of the curve, she saw the county sheriff's car sitting at a gravel county crossroad. She braked to a slow crawl and pulled in alongside the tan cruiser. She rolled down her window at the same time Wheaton was rolling down his. "Funding the Thanksgiving turkey giveaway?" she asked, raising her eyebrow. "Nah, football practice is about to get over in Borup, and the Ambrose boys will be speeding into Ada. One of them is dating the head cheerleader, and he tries to get there just as soon as they get out of practice. One of these days, he's going to come around that curve and end up in old man Peterson's field. Figure after a couple more days of seeing me sitting here, he's going to learn to slow down a bit before taking that curve. On your way to work?" "Yeah." "Why are you coming down 9? Aren't you driving for Milt over in Halstead?" "Yeah." "How's school?" "Okay." They sat there, quiet. Cash watched the sun dip toward the western horizon. Sheriff Wheaton watched the occasional car pass on the highway. Cash finally spoke. "Have any heard anything about the missing girl from Shelley?" "Huh, so that's why you're tracking me down." More silence, more sky, and road watching. "Well?" asked Cash. "You just focus on your schooling, girl. Leave the police work to me." Cash watched the sky turn to orange, pink, and purple stripes over the Red River tree line, 20-some miles west, across the flat farm prairie. Almost all the fields were plowed. Row after row of black dirt clods stretched for acres. To the north, a corn stubble field sat unplowed, most likely being left to winter over. A green John Deere tractor, slowly pulling a plow, raised dust behind it as it traveled down a gravel road a couple of miles over. "So where is she?" Cash finally asked. "Who is she?" "One of the hippie chicks at school said she's missing from our biology class." Wheaton looked over. "You know her?" "No. This chick just says she was in our class and now she's missing. They live in the same dorm." "She's the oldest Tweed girl, 3 younger sisters. She's in college over there to get a teaching degree." "But she's gone." "Yeah, I drove to Shelley Tuesday to talk to her parents after they called me in. Good kid, valedictorian. Her mom's working at the dime store in Ada to help pay for her college tuition. They're heartsick. The sister's crying. Not a wild kid, not one you'd expect to take off and not say anything." That's enough of that. It's about Girl Gone Missing. Thank you.
Oh, that was lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I think at this point we're going to bring everybody back into the room, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, there's Deborah. And then, awesome. Well, thank you again, all of you, for sharing some of your work with us. And I feel like we got a bit of a tour going from, the Eastern Pequots out west to the Yuma Nation, and then Midwest to the Ojibwe. So we got it all covered here. I thought I'd just start with maybe if you want to respond to each other's work for a minute. I know it was all, really moving. We went from sort of the politics that we're often, encounter as Indigenous peoples, and the whole issue of federal recognition. I don't know if you want to say more about that. And then to just sort of scenes from kind of like res life, it sounds like. And I love hearing about, just everything from turkey swaps and football, to HUD housing and casinos. Like, I feel like we got a lot there to think about. So just first want to invite you to think about your own work. And then, if anybody has a question, you can post it, and I think it'll come up in the ask a question, which I can monitor as we go. So I'll open it up to you all, or just your responses to each other's work.
Well, I love both of your works. That was beautiful. The passion of the termination poem, and that was, I think it touches all of us, and we're all afraid that could happen to any of us at any time. And then your reading, Deborah, it's like Indian country is Indian country all across the continent. So thank you both. Thank you both so much.
I think you have to unmute. Oh, Deborah. Yeah. No, you're good. I can hear you now.
Okay. One of the things that I like is that the literary festival organizers picked people from 3 different genres. So we have poetry, fiction, and nonfiction, and the demands that those things place on us, to me, is interesting. You know what I mean? Like how we shape our stories and why we choose the stories that we choose. I see that. I really appreciate the political in the poetry, and the kind of the calling out of history and the pain of that. And then I enjoy the imagination that goes into what Marcy does. And I just have to say that for me, writing nonfiction has a lot of ethical concerns, and it's been very difficult knowing what to portray and what not to portray. And because in some ways I think that Native people really do deserve to have stories that have middle-class concerns. And so you balance, the truth of what, for me, that piece is from when I was young, with who I am today as a professional. And sometimes it feels like the publishing industry only wants the former, which is what I just read, rather than who I am today. And I see myself as being tasked very much in nonfiction with trying to portray both, even though, ironically, it's harder to publish the latter. Like, recognizing a Native person who has a lot of success in the world is not always something that is welcome. That's what I would start with.
Natasha,
Sorry. I just want to say that I'm just so grateful to be in this space with you guys, and just to be uplifting Indigenous voices, because, like I said, for so often we're silenced. So to be able to have this platform and this space to just speak our truth is just so beautiful to me. And I'm just grateful to be here, and I'm so grateful to hear you guys' stories.
Yeah. Well, I want to pick up, Deborah, maybe on the point you just raised in terms of like some of the challenges of being a Native author and negotiating the publishing landscape. And I agree. I think Indigenous peoples, the reader, like for, the non-Indigenous audience often wants to see our stories through the lens of trauma or pain, and not so much, the joy or imagining an Indigenous future or professional life. And or the more you go in that direction, then the less Indian it seems. And so how do you negotiate all of that in your own work and writing? Or what, kinds of things do you feel like you're negotiating as a Native author out there trying to get your work published?
Well, I would say, first of all, that I feel like we deserve to have narratives and counter narratives. So nothing I'm saying is prescriptive in terms of what I tell other people I think they should do. It's none of my business, really, in the end, what you do. What I have to grapple with is my own family and my own stories. And, when I set out to write, like, what I thought of originally was that I wanted to try to create a full breadth of work that showed both my past and my present. And that's extraordinarily hard to do because it's a very broad narrative that agents and editors are not interested in. So they kept telling me, this is 2 books, you have to split it up. And I was very resistant to wanting to put my childhood, which was more of a stereotypical time, it had trauma, into a single standing book that didn't allow me to essentially say, I'm okay. Who I am today is actually very different than that child. I exceeded expectations. I wanted to reassure my readers. And then I realized that, it was kind of, it was a tendency of mine to reach for trauma first. And I don't know how many writers go through that, but it's what you go to first, maybe because you're resolving things for yourself. And so I was kind of always back and forth. And the one thing that I did find was it was harder for me to publish things that people didn't recognize in the publishing world as, and then so I finally folded and said, you know what, I will give them the first. I worked hard on the childhood book that we just took out for sale last week because I thought it's so unfair, but in some ways to write that book that addresses middle-class concerns, I first have to develop some sort of street cred, which I don't know that all writers from all ethnic groups have to do. Maybe, other people can jump in here. I certainly would have more to say, but I would love to hear how our other authors approach, their material and what they have decided to portray about their people.
Yeah.
I can go. Do you want to go, Natasha?
Go ahead, Mars.
So I'm writing fiction. For my adult novels, I'm writing crime fiction, and it's, set in the 70s. And my whole intention in writing was to write a crime novel that anybody could pick up, read, enjoy. Like you go through the airport. When we used to go through the airport, you grab a book and you read it on your trip. That was my goal. And when I first started sending the book out, I sent it out for 5 years to agents and publishers before I got my first publisher. But I think that when I first started sending it out, what the publishing industry was used to was those romance novels where, the half-breed falls in love with whatever and it's on the cover, And so people weren't looking at, Native crime or a Native writer writing crime. Or I don't know what they wanted, but they weren't interested in just a crime story. And after the book came out and it started getting read and people started hearing about it, then it was like, there's this, and other people told me, there's this whole backstory here about Native foster care. There's this whole backstory here about, kids being taken with Girl Gone Missing. I was writing about, and they're set in the 1970s. So back then in the Red River Valley, it was white girls who were going missing. So in the book, Cash helps rescue a white girl. And people were saying, well, how come you didn't write about missing and murdered Indian women? Well, that wasn't the story back then. And I'm working now on a book. I'm working on a book and I'm working on a play about missing and murdered Indian women. The play is depressing. like one of the actors who was reading said, "Can you put some humor in here?" And I said, "Well, I haven't heard any humor about missing and murdered Indian women." And with the book, the editors wanted some resolution. And I said, "They're missing or they're murdered. There isn't resolution." But she had wanted a book about missing. You know, so it's like struggling to do our stories fit a narrative. And I know lots of Native people are asking for the kind of book that you just talked about, Deborah, where they want something that's outside of, you know, our everyday trauma.
Yep.
Yeah. So it seems like there's a bit of a maybe division, like that's okay, maybe in the nonfiction or in the realm of fiction, but not in nonfiction, maybe.
Well, I'm thrilled that Marcy, you know, to me, it sounds like Marcy didn't overthink it. She got in there and told a great story, you know, and people loved the story, but she didn't come in like manufacturing from a theme to, she just went with the story. And I think that's very powerful writing. I think in the end, we do have to lose ourselves in the characters of the story if we're writing prose. Poetry is a different thing, of course. Poetry is somewhat of a mystery to me, I will admit.
Natasha, maybe enlighten us here. What kinds of things do you work with and against as you do your work?
It's definitely very difficult. I think I'm lagging. Am I? Yeah.
You good?
I'm good. Okay. I think it's just very difficult. A lot of my poetry is based around trauma, though. For me, poetry was an outlet. At a young age, when this happened, when I was 13, this happened. I'm now 30. So I've been dealing with the backlash of all that. So poetry has been a huge outlet for me, but it's also been a voice. Because for so long, I felt voiceless. And I felt like my truth didn't matter. And I felt like for a long time, they were just trying to erase us. But I had to find resilience in my poetry. So like, as much as I write about trauma, I've had to kind of step away from that at times because I'm more than trauma. So like when I write poems now, I look to the stories of my elders. I look to talking about those strong warriors that were here and are no longer here, but fought for me to be here, and the strong line of women that I come from. So it's just kind of like reiterating, finding my voice. And I think that's where a lot of my poetry is built around. And it's been very hard to kind of like get my work out there. A lot of times they don't want to hear resistance. They want you to play that nice role of, this is what a Native American is supposed to be. I'm supposed to be timid. I'm supposed to follow this guideline, but that's not who I am.
Right. So I was just going to say, sorry, go ahead.
No, so I think that's a lot of it, but finding my own voice in all of this has been big for me. And it's challenging. And the older I get, it gets a lot more challenging, but I've noticed my writing changing because of that. I'm not only writing about trauma now. I'm writing about the good times. I'm writing about the powwows that I experienced when I was a child and the powwows that we experience now in dancing, and why I dance, and why I tell these stories, and why I'm so passionate about my people, and why, like, just the fight. Every time I write and I put pen to paper, I feel like I'm making a difference. I'm making a change, and our voices are being heard.
Yeah, I think you definitely found your voice. And I think for us, like other peoples, you know, it isn't so neatly ever packaged either. Like, this is trauma and this is joy and this is, you know, celebratory, whatever. You know, all of that is intermixed all the time. And I was going to say, people think they know the trauma, but they don't really. You know, they just imagine it as, you know, the story of the vanishing Indian in many ways, and not about resistance, as you said, Natasha. I love that. Well, we're all grateful that you're all out there persisting. And it does seem, though, like in addition to all this amazing work that you guys are doing, there's a bit of a renaissance, right? There's in Native Lit, just in the past few years, you know, Sherry Dimeline's The Marrow Thieves, Lately Long Soldier, and Billy Ray Belcourt in the poetry realm, Therese Malhat in the, you know, memoir, and Tommy Orange writing fiction, and then also the stalwarts, Louise Erdrich and Joy Hardrow. Joy's the poet laureate now. So we're and of course, who knew Reservation Dogs would take off the way that it did on TV. So there seems to be, just in the last, even if 2-3 years, a real emergence of authors. And I'm just wondering what you guys think about what's animating that. What do you think's, help bring this work to the forefront? And then if that's impacted your own work at all to be kind of part of this new emergence.
I think that, we have so many crises going on right now in the world, and it's been a very pressurized time. And I think that a lot of Americans are asking themselves really deep questions. And I think that it's a time when alternative ideologies about the climate and democracy and all of that has a welcome audience. People want to be American in a way that makes them proud of who they are. And we're moving from a period of time where we were worried a lot about assimilation to being a culture that is becoming more influential. And, you can't have both. You really have to trust your audience and become influential without worrying about what's being taken when you share deeply felt stories. And we had a Native Renaissance in the 1970s, and because I'm work in a program where Tommy Orange teaches and where Brandon Hobson teaches, and Nigazi Pensano wrote Reservation Dogs, he was in the TV room, and he's a graduate of our institute. I really resist the idea of Renaissance because it suggests a swell that then declines and goes away. And we can walk into libraries, and I've walked into libraries my entire life, that has books and books and books written by middle-class men who grew up on the East Coast and have a lot of money. They're white. And nobody talks about them having a renaissance where they surge and then they fade. They're just permanent. They're a permanent part of the literary ecosystem. And I believe that our children and grandchildren, my grandchildren are half Native Hawaiian, and I believe that they deserve to have books that reflect their lives because it gives them confidence and it's good for them. It helps their self-esteem. So that's why I keep saying that we need narratives and counter narratives. We can disagree as Indigenous people and write stories that are all over the place, that portray many different lifestyles. And, trauma is not only negative. There are anything that we remember deeply, it impacted our brain enough in a traumatic way that we remember it. Some of those things are good, because a lot of our lives we just don't remember. It's impossible to remember every moment that you were alive. What is it that imprints in your mind and makes you always return and obsess over that particular memory is just that it was heightened, Mm-hmm. I think that the best books are very specific about those heightened moments, and that they reveal a life that is so specific that, it's all good, I guess, is what I would say.
Really good points. Yeah, all good. Or I know, at least in our language, you can't have one without the other. Mm-hmm. You can't have life without death. You can't have sorrow without joy. So, and they're often either this, very close to the same word. Mm-hmm. Marcy, and I love the thoughts about the Renaissance, notion of a Renaissance, and that, the work's always being produced. It's not always in the public eye. That's or right. Of being of interest, from the white gaze, but absolutely, it's always there and always growing. Marcy or Natasha?
Let's see, am I unmuted? I think that with internet and Zoom and all the new technology, that it's much easier for Native people across the continent to connect and to find each other's work. Mm-hmm. And so, and that's who I write for. I mean, in my mind, when I'm writing, my audience is Native, and I hope it sells to white people. I hope they like the story. I hope they buy it. I hope they, um, but I think that this technology has helped us reach each other, connect with each other. The first time I went to New York City when I was probably Natasha's age, I ran into people who would not believe I was Indian. They're like, no, you guys are gone. It's like, no, we're not. And I think that I don't know about a renaissance. I don't. But I do know that with the American Indian movement, with Wounded Knee, with some of the political activism, with the Indigenous Environmental Network, with Standing Rock, more and more people around the world actually recognize that we were not killed off, that we do exist. And so there's more, they just know that we're here.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a part of it, especially post Standing Rock. Prior to that, I couldn't remember the last time in the States, or what we call the States now, where Native peoples were on primetime news. I can't remember. I'm sure there was, the 60s, 70s. Yeah. Natasha.
I'm just like, I agree with everyone with the whole idea of the Renaissance, that we don't want to necessarily call it that because then it's going to fade out per se. But I can speak to the idea of, like, growing up, especially in Connecticut, there wasn't a lot of Indigenous writers that I was able to look up to. I didn't really realize what Indigenous writer was until I went to college. And I had a Native professor that changed my life and taught me these things that I should have learned from the beginning. So when you spoke, Deborah, when you spoke about your grandkids and them being visible and seeing themselves, I'm just so grateful that nowadays we see ourselves in the literature that's presented. I'm grateful that I can get up in front of my classroom and I can teach the kids about Indigenous literature in a time where, when I first started working at my job as a teacher, they didn't even know Native people existed. So to be able to get up in front of that classroom and speak not only my truth, but our truth, has been phenomenal. And that's because there's been a huge spotlight, on Native writers, even in, like, the state of Connecticut. I know I can think of Sharon Piper from Golden Hill Percussit, who has put out books that I'm able to teach in my classroom. And it's just that phenomenal feeling of feeling like you exist and you matter. And I feel like before, that was a thing that didn't necessarily happen. And I can, like I said, I can remember being a kid in high school and being like, wow, I know we exist, but we don't learn about us. And why is that? So I think there's been a systematic change as far as that goes. I know even in Connecticut, they recently passed a law where they have to teach Native American literature. They have to teach these things as of 2022. And I'm just grateful for being seen, for being heard. Like, that feeling is so empowering. And I know that it's empowering the next generation. And I can tell you, I feel like 5 or 10 years from now, there's going to be Indigenous books everywhere we go, because our voices are finally being heard.
Yeah, I guess that's the difference between, like, like exercising your voice and then having it being heard on the other side is like another step that doesn't always happen. Marcy.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that has happened previously is that it was non-Native people writing about Indians. And there are more and more Native people who are actually taking that up, which is, one of the things that I've said to my grandkids is that I actually want them to know from other Native writers. I want them to read Native writers, because stuff gets lost in translation. It can be so confusing when it's getting translated from another worldview. But I think that has shifted.
Yeah, one of the things that's difficult about being an Indigenous mother or an Indigenous grandmother in general is just that you send your kids to school and you can't rely on the school districts to teach them Indigenous values. So in some ways, you're trying to unteach or reteach or illuminate beyond the conversation of what they're learning, deeper things from your culture. And it's a battle, because all kids want to belong and they live in America and they feel like a part of America. And so when you talk to them about, I don't know, you just need help. And that's one of the things that really empowers me here at IAIA, is seeing all of the people who work here, the professors and the dean and the president. It's a Native institute, and everyone is very talented, and we're all working together towards the same goal, which requires cooperation and generosity. And also, we can't have a scarcity mentality about if one person makes it, someone else can't. That's not something that I want as a part of my program ever. I want there to be many successes, and I want us to be okay with the narratives and counter narratives, like I keep saying.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to uplift. Yeah, the erasure is profound, across all our spaces. And I think, the East Coast, Natasha, is almost like ground zero, where the erasure is even like, it's serious. It's palpable all the time. And I feel like you called your teacher into the room, so we should say her name. I feel like we should always bring folks into the room. So.
Her name is Meredith James. She's a professor at
Nice.
Eastern Connecticut State University, and she's from the Cherokee Nation, and she is phenomenal. If it wasn't for her, I would have never graduated college. And anytime I have a chance to uplift her, she's just a phenomenal person, and I love her from every part of me.
Nice. And then I have, I'm teaching a Native American Indigenous Theory and Politics course this semester, which I don't have any Native students. I think everybody in that class went to school in Connecticut, because I teach at UConn. And every single one of them is, at least once a class, somebody says, why didn't we learn any of this in school?
Exactly.
So they're mad too. They're upset that they don't learn, because we're learning a lot about Indigenous history in Connecticut. So William Apis, was a prolific Pequot writer, of early American century, of which we don't have a lot of writing. And he's amazing, and they've done a lot of reading of his literature. So, that everybody benefits, I think, about learning the truth of history, and that's becoming more and more challenging with all these crazy bans on this and that. We're back at book banning now, right? We're back at banning history, actual history in the classroom. And the students aren't the ones advocating for that. So they're nice reminders every single day. So we're getting close to time, but I would love to, just open it up if there's anything I want to share with budding writers out there. Maybe something about your own process, or kind of the joy that you mentioned a little bit about. It helps you feel like you're uplifting your people and your community, but maybe something about your actual what you do. Even it's like how you do it. It's often a mystery to folks who don't write. In the first thing in the morning, late at night. Do you have a routine? Like, how does this happen?
This is my job, like I've been doing this since 1990, but this is how I've been making my living, is writing anything and everything that pays. So I have to write something every day. So I write some every day. I think that for budding writers or people who want to write, the thing that I say to people is you have to submit. You have to take a risk and put your work out there. I know so many people who say, oh, I want to write, but they don't put their work out. And I think it was you, Deborah, you talked about there isn't a scarcity model. There isn't. Like, there is enough for all of us. And if we share resource, if we share information, and if we uplift each other, that just means that more people get out there, get heard, get their writing out there. There's a program here in Minneapolis called EQ at the Loft, and he's always looking for Native poets. So you should check that out, Natasha. I write, submit, risk getting rejected. Yeah, that's my.
Those are good words.
I'm still in the beginning phases. I've been writing poetry forever, so I can't probably give the best advice, but the advice that I can give is always speak your truth. No matter who it offends, no matter who it bothers, always speak your truth, because that's what we're supposed to do. That's how we keep our stories alive. That's how we inspire the next generation. So my advice is to always keep your truth. And I'm grateful to be in this room because I've learned a lot too. And I think I'm finally kind of ready to maybe step out there and finish that book of poetry that I've been working on for a long time. You guys are inspirations, and just thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being present. Thank you for being here and being a role model to the next generation of kids coming up. Thank you.
Yeah, I think for me, I have two things. One is get messy, which is just like that first, when you write something, it's a mess. And that's wonderful, because you can always be smarter when you go back and look at it a second time and a third time and a fourth time. Honor the effort that you put in, even if you think it's bad. Go back and look at it. There's something there that meant something to you in your former self when you sat down to write it. I see students that work really hard on something and then they bring it to workshop and then they put it away and they don't look at it again for years. And I did that too. And I think it's important to go back and save everything you write and just let yourself get messy. And then the other thing I would say is self-care. It's not a short road that you walk when you write. It's a long lifestyle. And I had this, I'm really into thinking about indigeneity as a worldwide thing. Like, I think that borders and politicians and governments, they've tried to divide us. When actually, once you get out of the United States and you start traveling, you see, wow, there are so many people who are indigenous, and we all share this history that we can relate to each other. And so I brought a good friend of Joy Harjo's, actually. Her name is Ali Kabi Eckerman. She won the Wyndham Campbell Prize out of Yale some years back, and she wrote this beautiful memoir. I brought her to speak remote via Zoom in January. And she told our kids, she said, when you feel like writing is hard, go find one of your elders. And you don't even have to talk to them. Just sit and hold their hand. And she said, I promise you, if you hold the hand of an elder, you'll remember why you're doing what you do. Because it's exactly like Natasha said. It's really sad that all of the contributions that we made to U.S. history, and there were a lot, to this country. We had vets go to World War II in huge numbers. I mean, they volunteered to go fight above any other ethnic group in this country. Native American men volunteered more than anyone. The Constitution. There's so many ways that we've contributed. And it's really sad for our elders that that people have forgotten, like, the beauty of who they were prior to colonization and even after colonization, the beauty. And so, hold hands with an elder, self-care, get your rest. Don't worry if it takes a long time. You're not on anybody's timetable but your own. That's my advice.
Wow. It's really wonderful advice from all of you. I want to encourage folks that are out there in the audience. Again, Marcy's got some new work that's about to come out, and Deborah, good luck in some of the upcoming meetings you have, but I'm sure we will see your stuff pretty soon. And Natasha, definitely, you're ready. Just send it in. Listen to Mars. Listen to your elder here. Push send. That stuff is definitely ready. Love to see that out in the world. So thank you so much. It was wonderful to just be here. What a treat. And I hope we see each other again.
That's good. Thank you. Go ahead.
And then I think we're going to call the host back in. Is going to come and share some last. Yes. You're muted. Yep.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say thank you, Sandy, for moderating, and thank you to all of our guests. You all did fantastic readings, and this was such a great discussion. And I want to emphasize to everybody in the audience that this will be archived, and it'll be available on our website for you to go back and rewatch it, replay it. I know I'm definitely going to. And a few more notices, actually, because we've got some more upcoming programming that I want to inform everybody about. So please check our site for both the archive of this talk and for our upcoming talks. We have a discussion on biography coming up at the end of March, and a talk about Korean American writers representing their homeland coming mid-April. At the end of April, we're having an on-ground Earth Day festival at Real Artways in Hartford, Connecticut. It's called Poets for a Greener World, and it'll be on Friday, April 22nd. It'll start with a cleanup of the Parkville neighborhood in the morning, and then we've got an afternoon full of poetry and science programming curated with our co-producer, State Poet Laureate Margaret Gibson. You can find the full schedule on our website. Please check it out. Please support us if you can, and thank you again for coming.